I was afraid of commitment. Now I'm alone at 79, an American life story. Narrated by Walter Callahan. Dayton, Ohio, Part 1. The setup, a house that breathes for one every day at 5:14 a.m. I open my eyes. Not because of an alarm. I haven't used an alarm in 11 years. My body does it on its own now, like an old clock that keeps ticking, even though no one wants it to, ticking away in the dark, measuring nothing. There's nowhere to go. No one is waiting for me, but my eyes open at 5:14, and the ceiling is right there. The same ceiling, the same crack, stretching from the light fixture to the corner like a river that leads nowhere on the map. And I think, here we go again. Another morning, another one they gave me that I didn't ask for. If I could go back in time, and I think about this every single day, not sometimes, not occasionally, every single day, I would find the version of me that was 32 years old, standing in a parking lot in Cincinnati with the most beautiful woman I ever knew, waiting for an answer, and I would shake that man until his teeth rattled. I would grab him by the shoulders, and I would say one thing, just one thing, say yes. But he didn't. I didn't. And that was 47 years ago, and I'm still sitting with it. My name is Walter Callahan. I am 79 years old. I live alone in a 3-bedroom house in Dayton, Ohio, a house I bought in 1987 when 3 bedrooms seemed like planning ahead, like I was making room for a future that was just around the corner. A wife, children, Sunday mornings with pancakes and noise and someone asking where their shoes went. That was the idea. That was always the idea. But the future didn't come. Not because it wasn't offered. It was offered more than once, more than twice. Life held out its hand to me again and again and again, and every single time I pulled away, not because I didn't want it. That's what people never understand. It wasn't that I didn't want it. I wanted it so badly that it terrified me. And the terror always won. Now those extra rooms sit empty. One has a desk in it that I never use. The other has boxes I haven't opened since I moved in. 38 years of boxes sitting in a room with the door closed. And I couldn't tell you what's in them if you paid me. Probably old tax returns. Probably nothing. Probably exactly what my life added up to. Paper in boxes in a room nobody enters. The house is quiet in a way that isn't peaceful. People talk about quiet like it's a gift. Silence. Solitude. Peace and quiet. They say it like it's something you'd choose. But there's a difference between choosing silence and having it choose you. There's a difference between a man who sits alone because he wants to think and a man who sits alone because there's no one left to talk to. I am the second man. I have been the second man for a very long time. My mornings have a shape to them now, the way water finds the shape of whatever container you pour it into. I get up. I use the bathroom. I walk downstairs holding the railing because my left knee doesn't trust itself anymore, and neither do I. I make coffee. 1 cup, always 1 cup. I used to make 2 out of habit back when I was still pretending that maybe someone would stop by. Maybe today would be different, but nobody stopped by. The second cup just sat there getting cold, and eventually I stopped making it because pouring it out felt worse than not making it at all. I sit at the kitchen table. It's a round table. Oak. 4 chairs. I sit in the same chair every time, the one facing the window. The other 3 chairs haven't been pulled out in I don't know how long. There's a thin layer of dust on the seats, not thick. I clean. I'm not a slob. But there's that fine layer, that quiet gray film that settles on things nobody touches. And it's there, on those 3 chairs, like evidence, like the house is keeping score. Outside the window there's a street, Maple Street, named after trees that aren't there anymore. They cut them down in 2004 to widen the road, and nobody planted new ones. So now it's just a wide road with no shade and no reason to be called Maple Street. And sometimes I think that's funny in a way that isn't funny at all. A street named after something that's gone. A house built for people who never came. I drink my coffee. I watch the street. Sometimes a neighbor walks their dog. Sometimes a school bus goes by, and I hear children's voices, muffled through the glass. And it sounds like something from another planet, like a radio signal from a world I chose not to visit. I could have had that. I could have had a child calling my name from another room. I could have had a wife pouring her own cup of coffee across from me, complaining about something small, something wonderful, something ordinary and alive. But I was afraid. That's the truth of it. That's the whole truth of it. I was afraid of commitment, afraid of being locked in, afraid of choosing one thing and closing the door on everything else. I told myself it was freedom. I told myself I was protecting my independence, preserving my options, keeping my life open and flexible and light. I had 100 ways to say it that sounded smart. I had a philosophy about it. I had arguments, I had logic. And now I'm 79 years old, sitting alone at a kitchen table with 3 empty chairs. And all that logic is worth exactly nothing. The loneliest part of old age isn't the silence. It's the understanding. It's looking back with clear eyes and seeing every moment where you could have chosen differently and knowing, not guessing, knowing, that you chose wrong. Not because someone told you, because you can feel it in your chest every morning at 5:14 when your eyes open and there's no one next to you, and the ceiling has that same crack, and the coffee is for one, and the house is breathing, but only for you. That's my life now. That's the shape of it. An old man, a quiet house, a cup of coffee, and a memory that won't leave me alone. Let me tell you how I got here. I grew up in Lebanon, Ohio, small town about 30 miles northeast of Cincinnati. My father worked at a paper mill. My mother was a secretary at the elementary school. We lived in a 2-story house on a street where everybody knew everybody, where doors didn't lock and kids played in the road until the streetlights came on. It was the kind of American life that people write songs about now, the kind that doesn't exist anymore. Or maybe it does somewhere, but I wouldn't know because I left and I never went back. My father was a good man, quiet, worked hard, came home smelling like pulp and chemicals, and washed his hands at the kitchen sink for 2 full minutes every night like a surgeon. He never complained, never raised his voice, but he also never said much, never told me he loved me, though I believe he did, never sat down and talked to me about anything that wasn't practical. How to change a tire, how to balance a checkbook, how to shake a man's hand. Useful things. Surface things. Things that teach you how to function, but not how to feel. My mother was warmer but overwhelmed. 3 kids, a part-time job, a house to run, a husband who was more furniture than conversation. She did her best, I know that now. But when you're a kid, you don't grade on a curve. You just absorb what's in front of you. And what was in front of me was a house where love existed but was never spoken about, where closeness was implied but never demonstrated, where being together in a room was considered the same thing as being connected. It wasn't, it isn't, but I didn't know that then. I was the middle child. My older brother David was the reliable one. My younger sister Karen was the bright one. I was the one who read books. I was the one who sat on the porch and stared at the road like I was waiting for something to come down it and take me somewhere else. My mother used to say I had a faraway look. She meant it kindly, but she was right. I was always looking past whatever was in front of me, always convinced that the real thing, the important thing, was somewhere else, somewhere I hadn't gotten to yet. That tendency, that constant looking past, would become the defining feature of my life. I just didn't know it yet. Lebanon was fine. It was perfectly fine. But fine felt like a cage to a boy who read Kerouac at 15 and Hemingway at 16 and thought that life was supposed to be big and open and full of motion. I wanted to leave. I wanted to see things. I wanted to be the kind of man who had stories, not the kind who had a routine. My father had a routine. Wake up, work, come home, wash hands, eat dinner, watch the news, go to bed, repeat. 37 years of repeating. And when he retired, he sat in a chair and looked out the window, and within 2 years he was dead. And I remember thinking, that's what staying gets you. That's what commitment to one place, one job, one life gets you. A chair and a window, and nothing left to see. I was wrong about that. I was so deeply, fundamentally wrong about that. But I wouldn't understand why, for another 50 years. I left Lebanon the day after high school graduation, June 1965. Packed one bag, took a Greyhound bus to Columbus, and enrolled at Ohio State in the fall. I studied English because I liked words and because I didn't know what else to do with a boy who read too much and talked too little. College was a revelation. People from everywhere, ideas I'd never encountered, women who were smarter than me, which was new and thrilling and terrifying all at once. I dated. Of course I dated. I wasn't a monk. I was tall, reasonably good-looking, had that quiet intensity that some women found interesting, at least for a while. But here's the thing. And this is where it starts. This is where the pattern begins. Every time a relationship got close to being real, every time a woman started talking about the future, about moving in together, about where this was going, something in me seized up, like a hand closing around my throat. Not anger, not disinterest. Fear. Pure, wordless, bone-deep fear. I couldn't explain it then. I can barely explain it now. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff and someone saying, "Jump, I'll catch you." And believing them, believing they would catch you, but still not being able to jump. So I'd pull away, slowly at first. A missed phone call, a canceled plan, a vague answer when she asked what I was thinking, then faster, a fight about nothing, a cold shoulder, a door closed a little too firmly, and then it would be over, and I'd feel terrible for about 2 weeks, and then I'd feel something else. Relief, space, air, the horrible, addictive relief of being alone again, of being uncommitted, of being free, that word. I built a cathedral to that word. I worshipped at it. I sacrificed everything good in my life on its altar, and it gave me nothing in return except exactly what it promised. Emptiness. Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. Somebody sang that once. I didn't understand it when I was young. I understand it now. I understand it every morning at 5:14, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back. Let me go back to the moment that mattered most. Let me tell you about Catherine. Part 2. The choice. The woman in the parking lot. I met Catherine Burke in the spring of 1974. I was 27. She was 25. I was working as a junior copywriter at an advertising agency in Cincinnati. Porter and Hewitt, long gone now, absorbed by some bigger firm in the 80s. She was a graphic designer at the same agency, the kind of woman who wore paint-stained jeans to the office on Fridays and got away with it because her work was that good. The first time I saw her, she was standing by the coffee machine in the break room, stirring her cup with a pencil, because there were no spoons. She had dark hair, cut short in that way women wore it in the 70s, and brown eyes that looked like they were always in the middle of finding something funny. She looked up at me and said, "They spend $1 million on client lunches, but can't buy spoons. That tells you everything about this place." I laughed. I don't remember the last time I'd laughed at something someone said in that office. Maybe I never had. She smiled, and something shifted in my chest like a piece of furniture being moved in a room I didn't know I had. We started talking. Then we started eating lunch together. Then we started staying late, not because of work, but because we didn't want to go home to separate apartments. She was from Covington, Kentucky, just across the river. Her father was a plumber. Her mother was a nurse. She grew up in a house full of noise and warmth and casseroles and arguments that ended with hugs. The opposite of my house, the opposite of everything I knew. Catherine was easy to be with in a way I had never experienced. She didn't demand. She didn't push. She was just there. Fully, completely, without agenda. She asked questions and actually listened to the answers. She remembered things I told her weeks later. That my favorite book was East of Eden, that I didn't like olives, that I was scared of thunderstorms as a child, and still flinched at the first crack of lightning even though I'd never admit it. She noticed me in a way that felt like being seen for the first time, like walking into a lit room after years in the dark. We started dating in May. By August, I was in love. And by love, I don't mean that word people throw around like confetti. I mean the kind that reorganizes your whole body. The kind where you catch yourself smiling for no reason on the drive to work. The kind where her voice on the phone at 11 p.m. makes the whole day make sense. I was in love with Catherine Burke, the way you're in love when you're young, and it hits you before your defenses can stop it, before the fear has time to build its wall. But the wall was coming. It was always coming. We dated for 3 years. 3 years of dinners and drives and arguments about movies and lazy Sunday mornings and all the small, sacred rituals that two people build when they're making a life together without calling it that. She met my family. My mother loved her. Even my father, who expressed affection about as often as Halley's Comet, pulled me aside once and said, "She's good. Don't mess this up." 6 words. The most personal thing he ever said to me. I should have listened. I should have carved those words into my forehead. We started dating in May. By August, I was in love. And by love, I don't mean that word people throw around like confetti. I mean the kind that reorganizes your whole body. The kind where you catch yourself smiling for no reason on the drive to work. The kind where her voice on the phone at 11 p.m. makes the whole day make sense. I was in love with Catherine Burke the way you're in love when you're young, and it hits you before your defenses can stop it, before the fear has time to build its wall. But the wall was coming. It was always coming. We dated for 3 years. 3 years of dinners and drives and arguments about movies and lazy Sunday mornings and all the small, sacred rituals that two people build when they're making a life together without calling it that. She met my family. My mother loved her. Even my father, who expressed affection about as often as Halley's Comet, pulled me aside once and said, "She's good. Don't mess this up." 6 words. The most personal thing he ever said to me. I should have listened. I should have carved those words into my forehead. In the spring of 1977, Catherine started talking about the future. Not aggressively, not with ultimatums, just naturally, the way a river starts bending toward the sea, because that's where rivers go. She mentioned a house she liked on the east side of the city. She talked about wanting a garden. She said the word children one evening while we were doing dishes, just slipped it in like it was nothing, like she was mentioning the weather, and I felt that hand close around my throat again. The fear, the old fear, the fear that had no name and no logic and no respect for the fact that I was in love with someone who was in love with me. It came back like it had never left, because it hadn't. It had just been waiting, crouching in the corner of whatever room Catherine's warmth had lit up, biding its time. I started pulling away. The old pattern. The pattern I knew like a song I couldn't stop humming. I worked later. I picked fights about nothing. She left the bathroom light on. She talked too much at his dinner party. She spent too much on groceries. Ridiculous things, weapons made of tissue paper. But I wielded them because I needed distance. Because distance was the only thing I knew how to maintain. Catherine was patient. She was so terribly, beautifully patient. She didn't yell. She didn't give ultimatums. She just looked at me with those brown eyes that saw everything. And she waited. She waited for me to come back to myself. She waited for the fear to pass. She waited like someone standing on a porch in the rain, holding the door open, trusting that the person they love will eventually walk through it. But I didn't walk through it. I stood in the rain, and I told myself the rain was freedom. The moment came on a Saturday night in October 1977. We'd gone to dinner at a little Italian place on Vine Street. Rocco's, I think it was called, or maybe Rosario's. It's gone now either way. Candles on the tables, red check tablecloths, the whole cliché. We'd had wine, we were relaxed, and Catherine reached across the table and took my hand and looked at me with an expression I can still see when I close my eyes, open, unguarded, brave in a way I would never be. And she said, "Walter, I love you. You know that. I've loved you for 3 years. But I need to know if this is going somewhere. I need to know if you see a future with me. Not tomorrow, not next month, but eventually. Because I do. I see it so clearly. And I just need to know if you see it too." That's all she said. No pressure, no threat. Just a woman asking a simple question across a table with a candle between them. A question that deserved a simple answer. And I froze. I sat there with my hand in hers and my heart hammering in my mouth, full of words that wouldn't come out because the fear was louder than all of them. I loved her. God, I loved her. Every atom of me loved her, but the fear said, if you say yes, you're trapped. If you say yes, you become your father. Routine, predictability, a chair and a window, and nothing else. If you say yes, you close every other door. If you say yes, you die slowly, in a house in Lebanon, Ohio, washing your hands at the same sink for 37 years. The fear lied. The fear always lies, but it speaks in your own voice, and that's what makes it so convincing. I said, "Catherine, I care about you. I do. But I'm not sure I'm the kind of man who can give you what you're asking for. I don't know if I'm built for that." I watched her face change. It was the kind of change that happens in slow motion, even though it only takes a second. Her eyes, her mouth, the way her hand went slightly slack in mine. She didn't cry. She nodded. She nodded like she'd been expecting this, like she'd been preparing for this, and that was the worst part, knowing that she'd already imagined this moment and had decided to ask anyway because she loved me enough to risk it. We tried to keep going after that. We lasted another 5 months. But something had broken, not between us, between me and the possibility of us. I had said the words out loud, "I'm not built for that." And once you say something like that, it becomes a wall you have to either tear down or hide behind. And I chose to hide. We broke up in March 1978. It was her decision, technically. She sat on the edge of my bed one Sunday morning, already dressed, and said, "I can't keep waiting for something that isn't coming. I love you, Walter, but I love myself enough to stop." I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I didn't say, "Wait, I've changed. I'm ready. Don't go." I just sat there and watched her pick up her coat and her keys and walk out of my apartment and out of my life, and I felt that horrible relief again, that sick, familiar, poisonous relief of being free. She closed the door softly. That's the detail that stays with me. She didn't slam it. She closed it softly, like she was being careful not to wake someone. 2 years later, I heard she'd married a man named Robert Devlin, an engineer at Procter & Gamble. Good man, from what people said. Stable, town, not afraid. They had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. I know this because Cincinnati isn't that big, and people talk, and sometimes information reaches you whether you want it or not. She moved to the suburbs. She got her garden. She got the life she described to me over dishes on a Tuesday night. The life I was too afraid to step into. And I stayed free. I want you to understand something. I didn't make this choice once. That's what makes it a tragedy and not just a mistake. A mistake is something you do once and learn from. What I did was a pattern. Catherine was the most important one, the one that changed everything, the one I carry like a stone in my chest. But she wasn't the last. There was Anne. In 1982. A school teacher with kind eyes and a laugh that sounded like sunlight, if sunlight had a sound. We dated for a year. She wanted to move in together. I said I needed more time. There was Diane in 1986, a lawyer who was sharper than me and didn't pretend otherwise. We dated for 2 years. She brought up marriage. I changed the subject so many times she stopped bringing it up, and then she stopped calling. There was Margaret in 1991, a widow with a young son. She was brave and beautiful and looking for someone steady, someone present, someone who would show up and stay. I showed up. For a while. Then I didn't. Each one. The same pattern. The approach, the connection, the warmth, the fear, the retreat, the relief, the silence, the regret, over and over, like a record skipping on the same groove. I was a man who fell in love easily and ran from it reliably. I was a man who kept choosing the door marked exit, even when every sign in the building pointed the other way. And every time I told myself the same story. I'm not built for this. I need my space. I need my freedom. Commitment is a cage. Love is a trap. Better to be alone and free than together and suffocated. I told that story so many times I believed it. I wore it like armor. I made it my identity. I was Walter Callahan, the independent man, the man who answered to no one. The man who kept his options open. But you know what options are when you never choose any of them? They're nothing. They're doors you walk past and never open. And eventually the hallway ends and you turn around and all those doors are locked now, and you're standing in the dark, wondering what was behind any of them. That's where I am. That's where I've been for years. The hallway ended. The doors are locked. And I'm standing in the dark. Part 3. The cost. A successful life that echoed. Here's the thing that makes this story complicated. Here's the thing that makes people look at my life from the outside and say, "What's he complaining about?" I did well. By every measure that the American dream bothers to use, I did very well. After Catherine left, I threw myself into work the way a drowning man grabs a piece of wood. Not because I loved advertising. I didn't. I tolerated it. But work was the one place where commitment didn't scare me. You commit to a project, you finish it, you move on. Clean, simple. No vulnerability. No one sitting across from you asking if you see a future together. I moved to a bigger agency in 1979, then a bigger one in 1983. By 1985, I was a creative director at one of the top firms in Ohio. By 1990, I had my own small agency. Callahan Creative, 12 employees, a corner office with a view of the river. I had business cards with my name on them. I had clients who returned my calls. I had the respect of people in the industry. I had the kind of career that looked impressive on paper and sounded impressive at cocktail parties and meant absolutely nothing at 3 in the morning when I couldn't sleep. Because that's when the truth visited. Always at 3 in the morning. The daytime was manageable. The daytime was full of meetings and deadlines and problems that had solutions. And I could lose myself in all of it, the way you lose yourself in a crossword puzzle. Busy enough to forget that you're just filling in empty spaces. But the night was honest. The night didn't care about my business cards or my corner office. The night just showed me the bed, the empty bed, the pillow that never had an indent on the other side, and asked me the question I spent all day avoiding. Was this worth it? I bought the house in Dayton in 1987, moved out of Cincinnati, because I told myself I wanted a change. But really, I was running from the city that held Catherine's memory in every restaurant and street corner and Sunset. Dayton was fine. Dayton was neutral. Dayton was the kind of place where nobody knew me and nobody asked questions, and I could build a life that looked full from the outside. 3 bedrooms. I told the realtor I was thinking about the future. She smiled and showed me the room with the big window and said, "This would be a lovely nursery." I nodded. I imagined it. I imagined a crib and a mobile turning slowly, and a baby making sounds that weren't words yet, but meant everything. And then I felt the fear, even standing in that empty room with nobody asking anything of me, even standing alone with just a possibility in the air. And I moved on to the next room and asked about closet space. The house filled up with things. Things are easy. Things don't leave. Things don't sit across from you and ask where this is going. I bought furniture. I bought a television, then a bigger one, then a flat screen when those came along. I bought kitchen gadgets I never used. A bread maker, a food processor, a set of copper pots that hung from a rack like decorations in a museum. I bought tools for a workshop in the garage. I bought books, hundreds of books, and lined them up on shelves, and felt a certain kind of comfort looking at them, all those spines standing shoulder to shoulder, like a crowd of silent friends. Stuff, all of it stuff, things to fill the space that a person should have filled, things to dust, things to maintain, things that sat in rooms and made the house look lived in, even though only one person was doing the living. The business grew through the 90s. I hired good people. I worked long hours. I traveled for clients, New York, Chicago, once to San Francisco for a technology account. I ate alone in restaurants that were too nice for one person. I ordered wine and drank half the bottle and left the rest. I went to hotels and lay on beds that were too big and watched television I didn't care about because the alternative was silence. And silence in a hotel room, in a city where you know no one, is a particular kind of loneliness that I wouldn't wish on anyone. But from the outside, and this is important, this is the cruelty of it, from the outside I looked like a man who had it figured out. Successful business owner, nice house, nice car. I drove a BMW for a while, then a Mercedes, then back to a BMW because at a certain point the cars are all the same and the only thing that changes is the logo. People at industry events would shake my hand and say, "Walt, you've really built something." And I would smile and say thank you and mean it, and also not mean it at all, because what had I built? A company that would be sold or dissolved when I retired, a house that would be emptied when I died, a life that had all the furnishings and none of the foundation. There were moments, scattered through those years, when the emptiness announced itself so loudly, I couldn't pretend not to hear it. I remember Thanksgiving 1994. I was 47. The office had closed for the long weekend. I'd been invited to a colleague's house for dinner. Tom Bricker, good man, big family, loud house. But I'd said no because I didn't want to be the single guy at the table, the one everyone felt a little sorry for, the one they set a place for, out of kindness. So I stayed home. I cooked a small turkey, the smallest one the grocery store had, and it was still too much for one person. I set the table. One plate, one glass, one set of silverware. I sat down and looked at the meal and the empty chairs and the quiet house, and I put my fork down and I didn't eat. I just sat there. I sat there for a long time, looking at a Thanksgiving dinner for one, and something inside me cracked, not broke, cracked. There's a difference. Breaking is dramatic. Breaking is a moment you can point to and say, that's when everything changed. Cracking is quiet. It's a hairline fracture that you can still walk on, still function on, still pretend isn't there. But it's there. And once it starts, it only gets wider. I spent that Thanksgiving on the couch watching old movies, and when the phone rang, my sister Karen calling from Florida to say happy holidays, I picked up and said, "Happy Thanksgiving, Karen." And my voice sounded normal, and she had no idea that I'd been sitting alone for 4 hours with an untouched turkey going cold on the table and a crack in my chest that was slowly spreading. The 90s passed, the new century arrived. Y2K came and went, and the world didn't end, which was both a relief and, in some dark corner of my mind, a small disappointment, because at least a global catastrophe would have been something different. I sold the agency in 2003. I was 56. The work had become repetitive, and the industry had changed, and the internet was making everything faster and louder, and I was tired. I sold to a bigger firm, walked away with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life, and retired. Just like that. 30 years of work, and it ended with a handshake and a check, and a small party in the conference room where people ate cake and said nice things and then went back to their desks and forgot about me by Monday. That's the thing about a career. You give it your best years, your prime years, and when it's over, it moves on without you, like a train that stops, just long enough for you to step off. You stand on the platform and watch it go and realize that you were never the train. You were just a passenger. Retirement. People talk about retirement like it's a reward, like it's the prize at the end of the race. You'll finally have time, they say. Time to travel, time to relax, time to enjoy life. But time is only good if you have someone to spend it with. Time alone isn't freedom. Time alone is a sentence. The first year of retirement, I traveled. Paris for a week. London for 10 days. A driving trip through the Southwest. Arizona, New Mexico, Utah. I saw the Grand Canyon and stood at the rim and looked down at something impossibly vast and ancient and beautiful. And my first thought was, I wish someone were here to see this with me. Not someone. Catherine. 25 years later, and my first thought was still Catherine. I came home from every trip to the same empty house. I unpacked the same suitcase. I put the photographs on the same desk. And the silence welcomed me back like it had been waiting, like it had kept my seat warm, like it knew I'd always come back because I had nowhere else to go. I tried. I want you to know that. I tried to fill the space. I joined a gym. I went 3 times a week and lifted weights and rode a stationary bike and exchanged nods with other men my age who were also trying to fill something. I joined a book club at the library. 4 women and me, reading literary fiction and drinking tea from paper cups. I volunteered at a food bank on Saturday mornings, scooping canned goods into boxes, making small talk with other volunteers, feeling useful for 2 hours before going home to the quiet. But none of it was enough. None of it was the thing, because the thing I was missing wasn't an activity or a hobby or a social obligation. The thing I was missing was a person, a specific, irreplaceable person who knows you, who sees you, who sits across from you at breakfast and knows from the way you stir your coffee that you didn't sleep well, who touches your arm when you're sad without asking why, who shares the silence with you and makes it bearable. That's what commitment gives you. That's what I spent my whole life running from. Not a cage, a home. I understand that now. I understand it completely and perfectly and uselessly, because understanding something too late is worse than never understanding it at all. Ignorance is a kind of peace. But knowing what you lost, knowing it was your fault, knowing you can never get it back, that's the punishment. That's the cost. The cost of my freedom was everything that would have made the freedom worth having. I want to tell you about the holidays. The holidays are the hardest. Not Christmas, although Christmas is bad. Worse is New Year's Eve. Everyone is somewhere. Everyone is with someone. The television shows crowds and confetti and people kissing at midnight, and I sit in my living room with a glass of something. Bourbon, usually. And I watch the ball drop, and I say Happy New Year to no one, and the house absorbs it and gives nothing back. One New Year's Eve, 2008, I think. I drove downtown just to be around people. I parked near the riverfront and walked along the sidewalk and watched couples walking arm in arm and groups of friends laughing and young people with their whole lives ahead of them, and I felt like a ghost. Like I was already dead but hadn't been informed. Like I was watching life through a window I couldn't find the door to. I drove home and sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes because going inside felt like going into a tomb. The house was dark. Every other house on the street had lights on, noise coming through the walls, the sounds of people being together. Mine was dark. I sat in the car and I put my head on the steering wheel, and I didn't cry. I rarely cry, which is its own kind of problem. But I made a sound that was close to it. A sound that had no word. A sound that meant, I did this to myself. The worst part of growing old alone isn't the loneliness of the evenings or the silence of the mornings or the empty chair at the table. The worst part is the accumulation. It's the way each year adds another layer to the understanding of what you've lost. When you're 40 and single, you can still tell yourself the story. There's time. There's always time. Maybe next year. Maybe the next woman. Maybe I'll be ready then. When you're 50, the story gets quieter, but it's still there. When you're 60, the story starts to sound like a lie even to yourself. And when you're 70, the story is over. There is no next year. There is no next woman. There is no getting ready. There is only the house and the coffee and the 3 empty chairs and the certain settled knowledge that you chose this. Not that it happened to you, that you chose it. That's the part that makes it heavy. An old man regrets differently than a young man imagines regret. A young man thinks regret is dramatic, falling to your knees, pounding the floor, screaming at the sky. It's not. Regret at my age is quiet. It's waking up and remembering. It's making coffee and remembering. It's sitting in a chair and remembering. It's a low hum that never stops, a background noise you learn to live with because the alternative is going insane. I have money. I have enough money for 2 lifetimes. I have a paid-off house and a retirement account and Social Security and a pension from the agency sale. I have health insurance. I have a newer car, a sensible sedan that gets good mileage. I have everything that the American dream promised me: financial security, property, independence. And I would trade every cent of it, every square foot of this house, every dollar in every account, for one morning of waking up next to someone who loved me. That's not a metaphor. That's not dramatic language. That's a real thing I would actually do if the universe offered me the deal. You want all of it? Fine, take it. Just give me one morning, just one. A Sunday morning with coffee and the paper and someone's feet touching mine under the blanket and a voice saying, "What do you want to do today?" That's all. That's everything. But the universe doesn't make deals. The universe doesn't negotiate. The universe just watches you make your choices and lets you live with them. And that's both the fairest and the cruelest thing about being alive. I live with mine. Every day, every morning at 5:14, every cup of coffee, every 3 empty chairs, every evening when the sun goes down and the house gets dark and I turn on the lamp. One lamp, because what does one man need with a lit-up house? And I sit and I read and I listen to the clock tick and I wait for another day to end so another one can begin so it can end too. And on, a conveyor belt of days carrying nothing, delivering nothing, leading nowhere. This is the cost. This is what I paid for my freedom. It was too much. It was always too much, but I didn't see the price tag until it was too late to put it back on the shelf. Part 4. The realization, locked doors, and quiet phones. There's a moment in every life, if you're paying attention, and sometimes even if you're not, when you realize the road behind you is longer than the road ahead. It doesn't come with a ceremony. There's no announcement. You don't wake up one morning and think, today's the day I understand that my life is mostly over. It sneaks up on you. It comes in through the cracks, through the small things, through the moments you used to ignore but can't anymore, because there's not enough noise left to drown them out. For me, it came in 2011. I was 64 years old. My brother David called me on a Tuesday evening. I remember it was Tuesday because I had a routine for Tuesdays. I went to the grocery store in the afternoon, came home, cooked something simple, ate at the table, watched Jeopardy at 7:30. Tuesdays were structured. I liked structured. Structure was the skeleton I built, around the emptiness, so it would hold its shape. David called and said, "Walt, Mom's not doing well." She was 87. She'd been in a nursing home in Lebanon for 3 years, a place called Shady Oaks, that wasn't shady and didn't have oaks, but had clean rooms and nice staff, and that was enough. She'd had a series of small strokes. Her mind came and went like a radio signal in a valley. Sometimes clear, sometimes static, sometimes nothing. I drove down the next morning, 45 minutes on I-75. I walked into her room, and she was sitting up in bed, looking small in a way that mothers aren't supposed to look. She weighed maybe 90 pounds. Her hair was white and thin, and her hands were folded on the blanket, like she was holding something invisible. She looked at me and said, "David, is that you?" "No, Mom. It's Walter." She stared at me. Then she smiled. "Walter, my boy with the faraway look." Something in me collapsed. Just that. Just her remembering that one detail. That one observation from 50 years ago. My boy with the faraway look. She was right. She was always right. I was always looking somewhere else, always looking past the thing in front of me. And now the thing in front of me was my mother, in a hospital bed, and I couldn't look past it, because there was nothing past it. Just a wall. Just the end. She died 2 weeks later. In her sleep, peacefully, they said, which is what people always say because nobody wants to imagine that dying is anything other than peaceful. David and Karen and I stood at the funeral in a small cemetery outside Lebanon, and the minister said kind things, and the wind blew, and the three of us stood there, 3 middle-aged people who had once been children in a 2-story house on a street where doors didn't lock. And I realized something that I hadn't let myself realize before. My mother died, and I hadn't been to see her in 5 months before David called. 5 months. She was 45 minutes away, and I hadn't gone. Not because I was busy. I was retired. I had nothing but time. I didn't go because going meant sitting in that room with her, and being seen, being known, being confronted with the life I'd built, and the life I hadn't. My mother would hold my hand and look at me and ask, "Are you happy, Walter?" And I couldn't lie to her, and I couldn't tell the truth, so I stayed away. That was the first crack that went deep. Not a hairline fracture anymore. A fault line. After the funeral, David and Karen and I went to a diner in Lebanon. The same diner we used to go to as kids. It had changed names 3 times, but still had the same red booths and the same smell of coffee and grease. We ordered coffee and sat in a booth and talked the way family talks after a funeral, carefully, avoiding the thing underneath, skimming the surface. Karen had her husband and her 2 grown sons and a life in Tampa that was full and complicated and alive. David had his wife Linda, 41 years married, 3 kids, 6 grandchildren, a house in Columbus that was loud every Thanksgiving and louder every Christmas. They had stories. They had people. They had the thing I didn't have. Karen looked at me across the table and said, "Walter, you should come down to Tampa sometime. You'd love it. The weather's beautiful." "Sure," I said. "Maybe. I mean it. Don't just say maybe. Come." "I will." I didn't. I never did. Not because I didn't want to, because going to Tampa would mean sitting in Karen's living room and watching her husband bring her coffee and watching her sons play with their kids and being surrounded by exactly the kind of life I'd spent 40 years running from, and I knew that it would break me. Not the hairline crack, the whole thing. So I stayed in Dayton. I stayed in the house. I stayed in the routine. But the routine was different after my mother died. The silence was different. It had a new texture to it, a new weight. It wasn't just the absence of people anymore. It was the presence of absence, if that makes any sense. It was the house actively reminding me that I was alone. Every creak of the floorboard, every tick of the clock, every gust of wind against the window, sounding like a voice saying, "Just you, just you, just you." I started thinking about the people I'd lost. Not just my mother, all of them. All the ones who had passed through my life and been pushed out or drifted away, or simply given up. Catherine. I thought about Catherine more than I should have, more than a 79-year-old man should think about a woman he dated in his 20s. But she was the one. She was the one that I knew. Even then, even in the moment, was the one, and I let her go anyway because I was more afraid of having her than of losing her. I looked her up once, in 2015. My neighbor's granddaughter had been showing me how to use the internet. I was late to all of that, still am. And one evening, alone at my desk, I typed her name into the search bar. Catherine Burke Devlin. I found an obituary. She had died 2 years earlier, breast cancer. She was 63. The obituary said she was survived by her husband Robert, her children Emily, James, and Sarah, and 7 grandchildren. It said she was a beloved mother, a devoted wife, and a gifted artist who spent her later years painting landscapes of the Kentucky hills where she grew up. It said the family requested donations to the local hospice in lieu of flowers. I read that obituary 4 times. Then I closed the computer and sat in the dark for a very long time. She had lived fully and deeply and richly. She had taken the love she offered me, the love I was too afraid to accept, and she had given it to someone else, to a family, to children, to grandchildren, to paintings of hills she remembered from childhood. She had lived the life she described to me over dishes on a Tuesday night in 1977, and it had been beautiful, and I hadn't been part of it. That was the night the crack became a canyon. I didn't cry. I should have. Maybe it would have helped, but the tears wouldn't come. Something in me was beyond tears, past the place where crying provides relief. I just sat in the dark and felt the full weight of what I had done, the full scope of the life I had refused, and it was so heavy that I couldn't move. I sat there until the sun came up, and then I made my coffee. 1 cup, and drank it at the table, 1 chair. And the 3 empty chairs looked at me, and I looked at them, and I thought, this is what you chose. After Catherine's obituary, I started noticing death more. Not in a morbid way, in a factual way. The way you notice traffic signs once someone points them out to you. People around me were dying, not just old people, people my age, which I suppose made them old too. But it still surprised me every time, because in my mind I was still the young man standing in that parking lot in Cincinnati, still 32, still with all the time in the world to figure things out. Tom Bricker, the colleague who used to invite me to Thanksgiving, died of a heart attack in 2016. I went to his funeral. The church was packed. His wife was there, his 4 children, his 9 grandchildren, colleagues, neighbors, friends. The room was full of people who loved him, who knew him, who would carry his memory into the future. I sat in the back pew, and I thought about my own funeral. Who would come? David, if he was still alive. Karen, if she could make the trip. A few people from the book club. Maybe the woman from the food bank who always said hello. A small gathering, a brief service, a quiet burial, and then the world would move on, the way it always does, the way it moved on after Samuel, after my mother, after everyone. That question started following me around like a dog I couldn't shake. Who will remember me? Not in the abstract, not my name on a piece of paper somewhere, but actually remember me. Remember the sound of my voice. Remember the way I laughed. Remember what I liked for breakfast, how I took my coffee, what I was like when I was happy. Who holds those things? Nobody. Nobody holds them because I never gave anyone the chance to learn them well enough to keep. My phone is quiet. I want you to understand how quiet. It rings maybe once a week. David calls on Sundays. Karen texts sometimes. Short messages, how are you? With a picture of her garden or her grandsons at the beach. A doctor's office confirming an appointment. That's it. That's the total of my connections to the outside world. A weekly call, an occasional text, and medical reminders. I see the neighbors sometimes. There's a young couple next door. The Hendersons. Nice people, early 30s. They have a daughter, about 4. Sometimes I see her in the yard running around, picking dandelions, laughing at nothing the way children do. And her mother calls from the porch. Come inside, sweet girl. Dinner's ready. And the girl runs to the door, and her mother scoops her up, and they disappear inside. And the light in the kitchen comes on, and I can see them through the window. A family at a table together, connected. And I turn away and go inside my own house, and the silence greets me. And I sit down, and I don't eat dinner, because eating alone has become something I just tolerate rather than enjoy. Growing old in America alone is a strange thing. The country was built on the idea of the individual. Pull yourself up, make your own way, stand on your own 2 feet. And I did all of that. I stood on my own 2 feet for 79 years. But nobody tells you that standing on your own 2 feet for that long makes you tired. Nobody tells you that independence, taken to its extreme, is just another word for isolation. Nobody tells you that the American dream, for some people, ends in a 3-bedroom house on Maple Street with 1 cup of coffee and 3 empty chairs. I go to the doctor. I keep my appointments. My health is decent for my age. The knee bothers me. My hearing isn't what it was. My eyes need stronger glasses every year. The doctor asks the standard questions. Any changes? How's your mood? Are you eating well? Any concerns? I always say I'm fine. I'm fine. 2 words that mean absolutely nothing. I'm fine is what you say when you don't want to talk about it. I'm fine is the polite version of I'm drowning but I don't want to make a scene. I'm fine. Walter Callahan is fine. He's healthy, he's solvent, he's independent, he's absolutely fine. I'm not fine. I'm not fine, and I haven't been fine for years, and the only reason nobody knows is because nobody is close enough to see. That's the final cost of avoiding commitment. Not just that you end up alone, but that your aloneness becomes invisible. There's no one close enough to notice that you're not okay. No one to see that the man who says, I'm fine, is lying. No one to look into your eyes the way Catherine used to, and know, without you saying a word, that something is wrong. Invisibility. That's the last stage. First you're free, then you're alone, then you're invisible. And invisible isn't romantic. Invisible isn't mysterious. Invisible is sitting in a doctor's office and knowing that if you didn't show up for your next appointment, it might be weeks before anyone checked. Invisible is going to the grocery store and realizing you're the only person there who isn't buying food for someone else. Invisible is existing without mattering, breathing without being noticed, taking up space without filling it. David calls every Sunday. How's the week been, Walt? Fine. Quiet. You? Oh, Linda's got her garden club. Tommy's bringing the kids over next weekend. Sarah's pregnant again, did I tell you? Number 4. That's wonderful. You should come up sometime. The kids ask about you. I will. Tell them I said hello. I always do. We hang up. I put the phone down. The house absorbs the silence again, eagerly, like it was just waiting for me to stop talking so it could reclaim the space. David's life is full. David committed. David married Linda at 24 and stayed and built a life and has grandchildren who know his name and his face and his stories. David chose the thing I was afraid of, and it gave him everything I don't have. I'm not jealous of David. Jealousy requires believing that you deserved what someone else got. I don't believe that. I believe I got exactly what I earned. I earned this silence. I earned these empty rooms. I earned this phone that doesn't ring. I made my choices, dozens of them, hundreds of them, a lifetime of them. And each one was a small step away from connection and toward this, and now I'm here, and the steps can't be untaken, and the doors can't be unopened, and the woman in the parking lot in Cincinnati is gone, and the question she asked across that candlelit table is still hanging in the air, 47 years later, unanswered, or answered wrong, which is the same thing. I was afraid of commitment. Now I'm alone at 79. That's not a bumper sticker. That's not a cautionary tale in a self-help book. That's my life. That's the actual, real, daily, lived experience of a man who chose freedom over love, independence over intimacy, options over decisions, and got exactly what he asked for. Nothing. Furnished, comfortable, financially secure nothing. The most well-appointed nothing you've ever seen. Part 5. The lesson. What I'd tell you if you'd listen. I don't usually talk to people like this. I'm not a speech giver. I'm not a philosopher. I'm an old man in a house in Ohio who made bad choices and lives with the results. I don't have wisdom. What I have is experience, and experience without wisdom is just pain with a story attached. But I'm going to try. I'm going to try because I'm 79 and the road ahead is short. And the one thing I can do, the only thing left that might mean something, is to say what I know to someone young enough to still use it. Not as a lecture, not as a sermon. I hated sermons growing up, and I don't intend to deliver one now. just as one man talking to another person across whatever distance separates us. If you're young, 25, 30, 35, and you're reading this or listening to this or however this reaches you, I need you to hear something, and I know you probably won't because I wouldn't have heard it either, not at your age, but I'm going to say it anyway because that's all I've got left. Words and the hope that maybe one of them lands. You think you have time. You feel it in your bones, that sense of unlimited runway, that conviction that the big things, the important things, the commitment things, can wait. You're busy, you're building something, you're figuring yourself out. You're not ready. You need more time. You don't. I don't mean that you're going to die tomorrow, although you might. I mean that the time you think you're saving isn't being saved. It's being spent. Every day you spend alone by choice is a day you don't get back. Every relationship you walk away from because it got too real is a door that closes behind you, and you might not know it's closing because it closes quietly. It closes the way Catherine closed my apartment door that Sunday morning, softly, carefully, like she was being kind even in leaving. And one day you turn around and the doors are all closed and you're standing in a hallway by yourself, and the hallway is your life, and it's quiet and it's clean and it's organized, and it's absolutely, completely empty. I chose freedom. I chose it again and again. I chose it over Catherine and Anne and Diane and Margaret. I chose it over children I never had, and grandchildren who don't exist, and family dinners that never happened, and Sunday mornings that nobody shared with me. I chose freedom like it was a treasure, and it turned out to be a room with no furniture and no windows and no door out. Freedom without love is a prison without walls. You don't see the bars because they're made of space, but they hold you just the same. I want to tell you something about commitment that I didn't understand when I was young. Commitment isn't a cage. I know it looks like one from the outside. I know it looks like giving up possibilities, like closing doors, like narrowing your life down to one person, one path, one set of choices. But that's the view from the outside, from the inside. And I'm telling you this as someone who never got to see the inside, but has spent 50 years watching through the window. From the inside, commitment is the opposite. It's expansion. It's the opening of a door that leads to rooms you didn't know existed. It's the discovery that sharing your life with someone doesn't make it smaller. It makes it bigger. It makes it so much bigger that looking back at your so-called freedom feels like looking at a shoebox and calling it the ocean. I know this because I've watched David and Linda for 40+ years. I've watched the way they argue and forgive and argue again. I've watched the way she touches his arm when he's telling a story at dinner, a small touch, barely there, that says, "I'm here and I know you and you're mine." I've watched the way his face changes when he talks about his grandchildren. Not pride, exactly, something deeper, something that doesn't have a word. The look of a man who knows he'll be remembered. The look of a man who puts something into the world that will outlast him. I don't have that look. When I look in the mirror, I see a man who will be forgotten, not immediately. David will remember me. Karen will remember me. But after them, nobody. My life created no ripples. I passed through the world like water through a net, touching nothing, holding nothing, leaving nothing behind. That's what terrifies me, not death. I've made peace with death as much as anyone can. Death is just the last breath, and then silence, and I'm already familiar with silence. What terrifies me is the forgetting, the being erased, the idea that 100 years from now there will be no one alive who knows that Walter Callahan existed, that he loved Catherine Burke, that he stood in a parking lot in Cincinnati and was too afraid to say yes, that he drank his coffee at a round oak table every morning and watched the street and waited for something he'd already turned away. Nobody will know that. Nobody will carry it. It will just be gone, like a footprint in sand, like a voice in wind, like I was never here. Listen, I'm going to tell you something simple. You're not going to want to hear it because simple things feel too easy to be true. And people your age want complicated answers because complicated feels more intellectual, more worthy. But the truest things are simple. They're painfully, embarrassingly simple. Don't wait until you're ready. You'll never be ready. That's it. That's the whole thing. Readiness is a myth. It's the biggest lie the afraid part of your brain tells you, and it's so convincing because it sounds responsible. I'll be ready when I have more money. I'll be ready when I figure myself out. I'll be ready when the timing is better. The timing is never better. The money is never enough, and figuring yourself out is a process that takes a lifetime, which means If you wait until it's done, you'll wait until you're dead. Catherine asked me if I saw a future with her. She didn't ask if I was ready. She asked if I could see it. And I could. I could see it so clearly it hurt. I could see the house and the garden and the kids and the Sunday mornings and the Tuesday evening dishes and the fights and the makeups and the whole messy, beautiful, terrifying thing. I could see all of it. And I was so afraid of stepping into it that I said no. I said no to the most beautiful vision of my life because I was waiting to feel ready, and feeling ready never came. And now I'm 79, and the only thing I'm ready for is the end of a story that should have been written differently. If you love someone, tell them. Don't wait. Don't analyze. Don't run the calculations in your head about whether it's the right time, or the right place, or whether they'll say it back. Just say it. Open your mouth and let the words out and accept whatever comes next. Because whatever comes next, rejection, reciprocation, awkwardness, joy, it's better than silence. It's better than sitting in a house at 79, replaying the moment you should have spoken and didn't. If someone asks you to commit to a relationship, to a marriage, to a life together, and your heart says yes, but your fear says no, listen to your heart. I know that sounds like a greeting card. I know that sounds like something written in cursive on a poster in a dentist's office. But I'm telling you from the other side of a life lived wrong that your heart knows things your brain doesn't. Your brain calculates risk. Your heart calculates meaning. And at the end of your life, it's not the risks that matter. It's the meaning. I calculated risk for 50 years. I assessed every relationship like a business deal. What could go wrong? What could I lose? What's my exposure? Where's my exit? And the result of all that careful calculation is a 3-bedroom house on Maple Street with 1 cup of coffee and a crack in the ceiling and a crack in my chest, and both of them getting wider every year. Risk analysis doesn't work on love. Love isn't a balance sheet. It isn't a spreadsheet with columns for pros and cons and a neat little total at the bottom. Love is a mess. It's the most beautiful, terrifying, irrational, necessary mess a human being can make. And the only thing messier than being in it is not being in it and knowing you could have been. I want to say something to the young men. Specifically the young men, because I was one and I know how you think. You think independence is strength. You think needing someone is weakness. You think asking for help, showing vulnerability, admitting that you're scared. You think those things make you less. The culture told you that. The movies told you that. The strong, silent type. The lone wolf. The man who doesn't need anyone. I was that man. I was the poster boy for that man, and I'm telling you, from the end of a very long and very empty road, that it's a lie. It's the most destructive lie we tell boys in this country. Strength isn't standing alone. Strength is standing with someone and letting them see you as you are. Scared, imperfect, unsure, and trusting that they won't leave. That takes more courage than anything I ever did in my career. That takes more bravery than any deal I ever closed. And I never had the guts to do it. Not once. Not when it mattered. I was brave in boardrooms. I was brave in negotiations. I could stare down a client and hold my ground without blinking. But a woman saying, "I love you. Do you see a future with me?" That reduced me to a coward every single time, because business is easy. Business is controlled. Business has rules and contracts and exits. Love has none of that. Love asks you to jump and trust, and that's it. That's the whole offer. Take it or leave it. I left it every time. I want to say something about regret. People tell you not to live with regrets. No regrets, they say, like it's a motto, like it's a badge. But let me tell you something that only an old man looking back on life can tell you. Regrets are not optional. Regrets are what you get when you make choices. And since you can't get through life without making choices, you can't get through life without regrets. The question isn't whether you'll have them. The question is which kind. There are 2 kinds of regret. The regret of having done something and the regret of not having done something. And I can tell you, having lived 79 years and made plenty of both kinds, that the second kind is worse. It's so much worse, it's not even a comparison. The regret of action fades. You did something stupid. You said the wrong thing. You made a fool of yourself. It hurts for a while. And then it becomes a story, maybe even a funny one, and you move on. But the regret of inaction, that doesn't fade. That grows. That compounds like interest in a bank account nobody asked for. Because when you don't do something, your mind fills in what might have been, and what might have been is always perfect, always beautiful, always better than what actually happened. The imaginary life is the one without flaws, and you can't argue with it because it never existed, which means it can never be proven wrong. I have an imaginary life. I've had it for 47 years. In that life, I said yes to Catherine in that restaurant. I said, I see a future with you. I see it so clearly it scares me, but I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. And she cried, and I cried, and we got married in the spring and bought a house and had children, 2, maybe 3. And I came home every night to noise and mess and arguments about whose turn it was to do the dishes, and I was happy. I was terrified and committed and imperfect and deeply, ridiculously, boringly happy. That life doesn't exist. It never existed. But I live in it more than I live in the real one. It's where I go at night when the house is dark. It's the movie that plays behind my eyes at 5:14 in the morning. It's the story I tell myself to fill the silence, the imaginary warmth I hold against the real cold. And it's torture, beautiful, self-inflicted torture. Don't build an imaginary life. Build a real one. Build it with someone. Build it messy and imperfect and loud and full of all the things you're afraid of. Build it now, today, not later, not when you're ready, not when the timing is right. Because there will come a morning, and it comes for everyone, whether you're 19 or 90. When you wake up, and the ceiling is there, and the crack is there, and the coffee is for one, and you think, did I actually live, or did I just prepare to live? Don't prepare. Live. I sit here most mornings in my chair by the window, same chair, same coffee, same view of Maple Street with no maples. And I think about my life, all those decades, all that running, all that freedom I was so desperate to protect. And you know what I protected? Nothing. I protected an empty house. I protected my right to eat alone and sleep alone and watch the new year alone and die alone. I protected my right to never be inconvenienced by love. Congratulations, Walter. You did it. You're free. And freedom, I can tell you now, is the loneliest word in the English language. If you're sitting somewhere right now, on a bus, in a car, on a couch, wherever you are, and there's someone you love, someone you've been keeping at arm's length because you're not sure, because you're scared, because the commitment feels too big and the future feels too uncertain, I want you to put this down and call them, or text them, or drive to their house, and say the thing you've been afraid to say, whatever it is. I love you. I'm sorry. I'm scared, but I want to try. Don't give up on me. Say it. Say it badly. Say it clumsily. Say it with shaking hands and a dry mouth and a heart that's pounding so loud you can barely hear your own voice. Say it anyway. Because the alternative is sitting in a kitchen at 79, looking at 3 empty chairs, and knowing that the bravest thing you ever did was build a business, and the thing that actually required bravery. The thing that would have given your life meaning and warmth and someone to pour coffee for in the morning. That thing you ran from. Don't run. I ran for 50 years and ended up exactly where I started, alone. The clock is ticking. I can hear it from here. That old clock on the wall in the kitchen, the one I bought at an antique store in 1992, the one with the brass pendulum that swings back and forth, measuring nothing, counting nothing, just ticking. Can you hear it? Good. Then go. Go say yes. Go choose someone. Go commit. Go be terrified and do it anyway. Don't end up here, kid. Don't end up at a round oak table with 1 cup of coffee and a lifetime of quiet and a name that nobody will remember. My name is Walter Callahan. I'm 79 years old. I was afraid of commitment, and now I'm alone. That's my story. It's not a brave story. It's not an inspiring story. It's just a true one, or as true as an old man's memory and an old man's regret can make it. If it means something to you, do something with it. Not tomorrow, not later. Now. Before later becomes never. Before never becomes your whole life. The sun is coming up over Maple Street. Same sun, same street, same window. The coffee is almost gone. The house is quiet. The chairs are empty. But yours don't have to be. This is a memory-driven storytelling piece. A deep, personal confession inspired by true life experiences. The names and places are composites, but the regret is real. It belongs to me, and to anyone who sees themselves in it.